turn back to praise.
So, last time I got up here and I confessed one of my worries is running out of material. One of my other worries whenever I'm trying to prepare for a class is, man, there are like so many different paths and so many different rabbit holes that as I'm going through trying to pin down and get a organized thought that hopefully will be beneficial to you all. So, as I was going through and preparing and studying, there are some rabbit holes that we're going to go down, but ultimately I think it'll be very beneficial as we go through these first 3 chapters in Hosea. So just stick with me as we kind of go around. Before we jump into the text, though, we're going to do just a little bit of review from Sunday and lay just a little bit of groundwork. And this, again, I think will help us not only for tonight and for my lesson for the Bible class on Sunday, but also just in general with these minor prophets as we go through them. This is straight from Jeremiah's slides. With a prophet, the main thing that always sticks out in my mind is being a mouthpiece for God. You think of Aaron being the mouthpiece for Moses for God, but also that they are sent to give a warning or an encouragement to turn back, repentance, turn back to God. Kind of the 4 points that the author put out in our workbook here was to teach the people to trust in God, remind them of the stipulations of the covenant that he had with them, and the blessings that are conditional upon that, to reveal a message of hope for future of those who hope in God, and to ultimately prophecy, messianic prophecy, and prophecies that will help to confirm what they've said in the present will in fact happen in the future. Ultimately, it's God showing his power that what he says, he will do. And what he says is what he means. And that's a lot of, whenever we go through Hosea and kind of track back to original things that God said, like, well, that's him fulfilling what he said. So keep those in mind as we're going through, and we'll reference back to those. Life of a prophet. As in general, think it's an easy life or not so easy, a little bit more difficult? Not easy. I don't think so. Why? Why not? They're called to do a lot of things that are maybe not necessarily fun or pleasant. Sent to give a message to a rebellious people. That's back on the slide 2 of the review that we had. To warn or encourage, to bring back to faithfulness. As Dara said, perform actions to illustrate or symbolize the message that they're giving, and they were not a lot of fun that they had to do. Kind of go along with what Carrie said, when they were sent to that rebellious people, I mean, they weren't well received, right? I mean, very often they were hated, they were rejected, persecuted, and even martyred. Is there a passage that jumps into your mind whenever I was kind of doing this? There's one that really stood out to me in the New Testament that kind of brought this point to home. See if you guys can guess what's in my head. Yeah, Stephen, right? I don't think I put it up there. In Acts chapter 7, 51 through 53. Somebody want to turn over and read that?
You men who are stiff-necked and uncircumcised in heart and ears, are always resisting the Holy Spirit, you are doing just as your fathers did. Which one of the prophets did your fathers not persecute? They killed those who had previously announced the coming of the righteous one, whose betrayers and murderers you have now become.
So, I mean, and then right after that, Stephen's martyred, right? So it's not anything that was, it was very well known, talked about, and they just that rebellious nature of the people that God sent to try to warn and to bring back, and that's kind of how they were treated. So I agree, difficult life. Not one that I would not be very happy, or not happy, but eager, I guess is the right word. Not one that I'd be eager to sign up for or to be called for. But they were called, and they did. So, you guys might be a little bit confused. We're supposed to be talking about Hosea, right? Well, as I was going through and making these slides and thinking about this stuff, I kept thinking about Ezekiel, and maybe it's because I'm going through a separate study on Ezekiel, but man, all this stuff, Ezekiel, he had to go through it, and to a higher degree than what we're going to read about in Hosea, but I think he's a very good example for us to briefly look at before we jump into our text in Hosea, but also probably in the other minor prophets as we go forward. So he was about 175, 200 years after Hosea. He's in Babylonian captivity whenever he is doing his work. He was told to be a watchman to the people. He was given a message, and he was to deliver that message. It wasn't up to him to be successful it wasn't a matter of success on if the people heard and agreed with him, or the people heard and they repented. That wasn't his job. His job was to be a watchman and to deliver the message to the people. And if he didn't, he was going to be responsible for the blood would then be on his head, because he didn't do his job to deliver that message to them. He had to perform about 9 symbolic actions, and each time those actions are going back to those previous slides, to teach the people to trust in God, to remind them of the covenant, to remind them of his promises, reveal hope, point to Christ. Any one of these, as we're going through, think about, are any one of these ones that you would want to have to be called to do? There's some pretty tough ones in there. So the first one was he had to be mute for a period of time. Couldn't speak at all except for the words that God put in his mouth. I tried to look up to get a time frame on about how long that was, and I didn't come up with anything. Do you have any idea? I can't remember if it said. I know it's like 30 chapters in Ezekiel, but I don't know what the time frame is on that. But a good period of time. Oh, and I was going to say, any one of these actions, also think about what's the point of it, right? The point is for people to see, what is this guy doing? And to raise that question and get them to stop, to get them to talk or to think about the things that are being said, to really draw attention and focus to what is this guy doing, and then what is the meaning behind it. So, not talking for a period of time except for the words that God put in his mouth. He had to create a little small-scale replica of the city of Jerusalem, and then he had to attack it, which you see him what's he doing? He's just playing in the dirt over there, but then delivers the message that goes along behind that. Had to lay exclusively on his left side for 390 days. Couldn't get up. Had to just lay there. And then right after that, had to turn over and lay on his right side for 40 days. Had to be on a starvation diet for about a year of only 8 ounces of bread, 1 1/3 pint of water. For about a year. You see, people be looking at him and be like, this guy's starving himself. What in the world is going on? And then gives the message that it's related to the siege that's about to happen in Jerusalem. He was told to cook his food over human excrement. He wants to do that. He talked to God, and God allowed him to, instead of doing human excrement, to use cow dung, which was still a defilement or still gross that he had to do. But was told to shave his head and beard, and then with the hairs, one he would burn, one he scattered to the wind, one he tucked inside, or a third of it he tucked inside of his cloak, but different symbolic of God and what he's going to be doing to the nation and the people. Had to make a show of packing up all his belongings, covering his face, digging under the wall, and then escaping. Of course, where are they at? In Babylon, right? He's not escaping anywhere, but making a big show of it, and that had to do with the king at the time, Jehoiakim, I think. Anyway, him trying to escape the Babylonians. Oh, I'm behind, sorry. So he's on that starvation diet. He had to eat and drink with trembling. Like, couldn't hardly even get what he was supposed to be eating into his hands. And the last one was told that his wife was going to die, but that he could not mourn for her. I mean, think about that, how hard that would be. I mean, all these things, like, it's just to really bring to the focus that these prophets, they were called to a life that was very difficult to do a job, to deliver a message to people that were rebellious, that didn't receive it well or at all, persecuted them, hated them, and sometimes killed them. But yet they still did what they were called to do. Okay, so getting into Hosea, our lesson, the person of the hour. Who was he? Son of Beeri. Who was Beeri? No idea, right? It's one of those where it's like, okay, cool. He's the son of Beeri. I mean, like, we no really information beyond that. Was from the northern kingdom. I've read a couple, I mean, it was in our workbook here and also other places where it talks about him being from the north, and I don't know, I didn't really find much other than in chapter 7 and verse 5. Somebody want to turn over there and read that. This was the closest thing that I found as far as being evidence of him being from the north, at least that I thought.
In the day of our king, princes have made him sick, inflamed with wine. He stretched out his hand to scoffers.
So there he says, our king, right? So that was really about the only language that I thought that would be, that I found that would be kind of him being from the north. His time frame was from 750 to 721 BC during the reign of Jeroboam II. This is straight out of the workbook. What was he known as, or what was he known for? Okay, that's the first one that everybody thinks of, right? Which Jeremiah stole my thunder on Sunday, giving that big reveal away. Yes, married the harlot. The workbook says he was known as the prophet of God's love, which is interesting, that we'll kind of get into as we go on. But why, think about as we're going, why would Hosea be thought of the prophet of God's love based on what he's called to do and the message that he gives?
Because what he had to do, what he was going to have to do, one with his wife,
Mm-hmm.
and two, all the other things that happen to take place, and then he's got to turn around and say, got to tell him to take back your wife, and there's something to get back to Israel, basically.
The physical things, actions that he had to do to relay or translate to the spiritual that God is willing to do. Yes, exactly. Very good. What was the problem that he was sent to confront? I mean, what is the point of God telling Hosea to take this harlot and to take her back? And what was the point? I think I heard it. What? Yeah, idolatry, right? Specifically, the worship of Baal. Their idolatry, their turning away from God to Baal, is the equivalent of the physical Hosea and Gomer of playing the harlot, of harlotry. So, how do we know that it's Baal? How do we know that he was the main one that they were turning to and worshiping at this time? Was it just some random one that Hosea plucked out of the air that God told him? Turn over to chapter 2, verse 8, and verse 13, verse 17. So these are the references that, as far as idols and other gods that they were worshiping at the time, I mean, really all that they have record of, at least from Hosea, was Baal. There at the end of verse 8, for which they prepared for Baal. Verse 13, I will punish her for the days of the Baals to which she burned incense. And then 17, I will take from her mouths the names of the Baals. So this was one of those rabbit holes that I went down as far as like, okay, they worshipped Baal. I mean, what does that mean? Like, what does that entail? Like, why is that, other than that not being God, why is that such a big deal? Obviously, that not being God and then worshiping somebody else is the big deal. But specifically, like, why is the worship of Baal? Why was it so prominent? Why was it a hard thing for the Israelites? Because this isn't the only time that they did that. It's not the only time that they went and worshipped him. Like, there's a lot involved with it. Go ahead, Carl.
Well, if I understand what I read right, it was God of fertility, the supreme God, if you will, of fertility, and that was from the Canaanites.
Mm-hmm.
And that's fertility, obviously, what it is.
Yeah, so Baal, my understanding, is basically kind of a generic term. It's just master or Lord. And so there were multiple Baal gods, right? From what I read and kind of understood, Baal Hadad was the prominent one, the most prominent one, the ones that they worshipped, or at least in the land of Canaan. And yes, was the god of storm and fertility. They thought that it controlled the rain, thunder, fertility, not only in livestock, but also in humans. So keep this in mind right here, the thought of Baal, Hadad controlling the rain, the thunder, and fertility. As we go through, particularly in chapter 2, with God and his response to Israel and the consequences of them following Baal, it'll be interesting to read kind of what he says and how this plays into exactly what they're thinking that they're going after and worshiping. Okay, so Baal. What worship typically was involved with the worship of Baal? What did the people do? Any ideas? I gave that one away, didn't I? Drunken feasts, right? Yeah. Sexual immorality. Exactly right. Sacrifices, including their children. This is one that I didn't really realize. I knew that Molech was one that they did that, but I didn't realize it was just Baal too. Somebody turn over to Jeremiah 19 and verse 5, please, and read that. Yeah, so, I mean, not good things to do, right? I mean, basically, them going and worshiping Baal, doing these things, the thought was, well, we're going to get Baal's attention. We're going to stir him up. We're going to awaken him, and then he can give us these blessings of rain, which with rain comes crops and life. And so that was kind of their thought with the sexual immorality. We're going to do whatever, and then that will allow Baal to bless us so that we can be fruitful, whatever. Basically, I mean, it's a very, very self-indulgent of the flesh way of worshiping, right? They could worship this God. I mean, it's kind of, we see it today, right? You can, if you want to leave what God says and do something, whatever, you can find somewhere that you can do that, and it is okay. It's accepted. It's worship to be able to do that when it's not what God wanted or directed. Talking about that stirring up or awakening of the God, what did Elijah, whenever he was on Mount Carmel in the contest with the prophets of Baal, does anybody remember off the top of the head what he said mockingly to them? Yeah, he's like, maybe you guys aren't loud enough. Get louder. Maybe he's asleep. And so they're like jumping around and cutting themselves and like, exactly, like, wake him up. Maybe he's going on a journey. Maybe you need to get his attention. So all these things are, it kind of makes a little bit more sense of why Elijah would say something like that. Well, if that's what they thought they had to do in order to get his attention and get his blessings, then anyway, so I thought that was interesting. That's in 1 Kings chapter 18, verse 27 and 28. Okay, so any thoughts, questions, or comments at this point, Steve? It's always that thought of any deviation from God's word, no matter how minute or how not big of a deal that it is, when you take that to its full end, like this is where it can end up, right? If you don't have that solid standard that you go by, what's to stop it from getting to that point? Exactly. Good point, Steve. Okay, so, Hosea. What did God tell Hosea to do? As Lisa said, go marry a harlot. So, whenever I was looking at this, first thing I thought of was like, well, I mean, why marriage? Why go marry a harlot? Like, why was there something else that he could have done that would have been similar or that would have gotten the message across just the same? I don't think so. I mean, obviously, he did it because that's what God told him to, and that's what God wanted. But, marriage is the very first thing that God established, right, with Adam and Eve. Like, the marriage, the sacred covenant. There should be no closer bond or relationship that we have on earth than we have with our spouse. I mean, no other closer relationship at all other than our relationship with God. And so having that be the kind of center focus point of Hosea's message to the people is really, I mean, like, there's not another degree, there's not another level of, I don't know, what, you should have complete trust, complete devotion to your spouse, right? You should having that complete trust and devotion to your spouse. Well, what happens with that trust is broken. Like, I can't hardly imagine a greater hurt that you could have or experience, right? So who does he marry? Marries Gomer, which is, I don't know, I guess a lovely name at the time in the land. Perhaps that's why she became a harlot. I don't know. But the Mary's Gomer. One thing that kind of came up that I didn't really expect or anticipate whenever I was kind of looking at this was she a harlot at the time of marriage? Or was this something that was going to be predicted going forward? And was she physically a harlot? Or was this a spiritual representation? Or whenever it says in verse there in chapter 1 where it says, take yourself a wife of harlotry and the children of harlotry from for the land has committed great harlotry. A lot of harlotries in there. But I don't know, like I had never crossed my mind. Never thought that it was anything other than a physical instance at the time of them being married. Any thoughts on that?
I think it's speculated or debated, on both sides. So I don't know that we could be dogmatic on it. But it parallels God's relationship with Israel, and when He took Israel, she is, only His, a virgin, not defiled, new kingdom, all that kind of stuff. And so there's this parallel, I think, that at least needs to remain constant in our minds. I think it doesn't seem to me to be a doubt that it actually happened, that he married Gomer and she committed adultery, but that it seems to me that this would be something that God speaks of her as a harlot in regard to the future occurrences that would face Hosea.
And that's, and again, like I said, I never really thought about it. I don't know that it really matters, right? Whether she physically was at the time of marriage or was going to be after. But I think that, I don't know, it kind of seems like if God calls Hosea to do that, it's like, whether she actually was at the time or not, like he knew what was going to be coming down the pipe, right? Like it's something that he's aware of and is going to be an issue. And man, how would you like to be told, like, go marry this person, and by the way, they're a harlot, or they're going to be a harlot, and you're going to have to like suffer through that.
Which might be a parallel as well, because God chose Israel knowing what they would do. He still made the covenant, and He still protected them and showed them love and such. And it doesn't take away from Hosea's love for Gomer either. That it's not like he was always skeptical of her or whatever, but fell in love with her and was committed to her, and then she did that. That makes it even more real.
Well, think about God leads the Israelites out of Egypt, right? All the plagues, cross the sea. Moses goes up on the mountain. How long was he up there before Aaron makes the golden calf? 40 days. Like all this stuff that they just witnessed and experienced, and immediately, like they turned. And so, like as a nation, like this, I could see it already as Gomer being a harlot at the start. Really, kind of the children of Israel have always been that way, right? Almost from the very beginning. Paul, do you have a?
It's also kind of like a test for him as well, because like what Peter did when God showed him the unclean things, and he wanted to not take part of it. That's also got to be in his mind. So it tests his will to do God's will.
And that was one of the debates or arguments as far as whether she physically was a harlot or not, as far as is God asking him to marry her, something that is right or good or whatever. And the example of Peter was brought up to where, the difference there was it was a vision for Peter, and this was an actual thing that Hosea was supposed to do. DJ and then Jeremiah.
And it shows God's pure love for Israel, and then where I forgot her name, Gomer, where she ends up is due to her actions, and where Israel ends up is due to their actions, and they're the ones causing the rift in the relationship, and God's love is going to be there and available
you brought up a good point of consequences, which we're going to talk about quite a bit in a little bit, but also, again, the great love that God shows towards his people, towards his children, that even though they do all this stuff, he is willing to provide an avenue for them. And talking about marriage and like no closer bond and no closer relationship and the hurt that was there, for Hosea and Gomer, whenever Gomer leaves and goes away, basically turning her back on him, like DJ was saying, if there's any degree of separation between us and God, it's not from God moving away from us. It's not from God, any deviation or any distance that's there. It's us turning our back to God and moving away from him and from his standard and his word. God is the constant, right? Any deviation or change is from us, Jeremiah.
I think it's important to remember that as much as Hosea is a representation of God's mercy and long-suffering toward Israel, that Gomer is a representation of Israel, and that it didn't happen overnight necessarily. It happened, like you said, with a calf, that this is the God that brought us out of Egypt. They're still worshiping Jehovah in a perverted way, and then it reached to the Baals. But Gomer, why was she so immoral to not just have one or even two children by harlotry, but three? I mean, she kept doing it, and she's a product of her environment, and that's how immorality works. It decays and it spreads, and so she's as much a representation of Israel as God is, of Hosea as of God, and we got to keep that in mind as well.
Aaron?
Alluding to this is that it's interesting to me that God provides the expectation early on for his people. These are my expectations. I think you alluded to that when you read Jeremiah chapter 19 and verse 5, where God says, which I did not command or speak, nor did it come into my mind. His thought is that an expectation is that we will be pure, that we will be committed to him. But how awesome is it, and Jeremiah's done a great job in talking over the last 3 or 4 weeks about grace. How awesome it is, though, that there is God's grace, that for us today, that we may fall. We are going to fall from that expectation, but there's grace there now to make us back right.
That avenue, right? And there in Jeremiah 19:5, what was the last thing it said? Never even entered my mind, right? Well, I mean, did the children of Israel, did they know what they were supposed to do? Did God give them rules, laws, expectations, whatever? Yeah, of course. That's what Moses was up on the mountain doing, right? Getting the law, that he could bring it down. So they could know what God wanted them to do. They could know his mind. How do we know God's mind now, today? Jason? A little bit hypocritical, isn't it? Think of the woman who was caught in adultery, and then they wanted to stone her, and what does Jesus say? You without sin cast the first stone. Like, you can't pick and choose. Can't stone her because she's playing the harlot because of the law. Well, I mean, what regard of the law are you given anyway? Answer my own question earlier. How do we know God's mind and what we're supposed to do? He's given it to us, right? The Bible. Holy Spirit gave words from God, written them down throughout time, so that we can know God's mind and we can know the expectations and the what we're supposed to do and what's pleasing to Him. We talked about it, going away and doing other things in the name of worship. That's not pleasing to God. It's not what God said that He wanted. Anything other than that, He doesn't want. It's not pleasing to Him. It's idolatry, right?
I think the whole point of him marrying Gomer is to get Israel and us to realize that God's relationship with us is not this cold rule book type of technicality. It's very personal to him. We understand that in our marriages and how close that bond is in the trust, and how much of a betrayal and treachery is what the Old Testament calls it, that occurs when there's an unfaithfulness there. And God is getting that through our heads, that this is how I view my people. It's not just some, hey, you do what I want you to do, and that's good enough. Because even the kings of Israel sometimes did exactly what God told them to do, but for selfish reasons. And that's what got them to this point. It's about faithfulness and devotion, true following of the heart to God and His ways, and having a union and a fellowship and a relationship. It's not just, we happen to be the nation of Israel, and therefore we got to follow Jehovah's rules. It's relationship, and there's betrayal there that's true.
It's not that checking the box, okay, we did this, we're good. We did all the stuff that God told us to do. It's doing it. That's what it talks about in John, right? The woman at the well. Those who worship God must worship Him in spirit and in truth. It takes both things. Can't do one without the other and it still be pleasing and acceptable to God. But it also, this is part of the reason why Hosea, I think, is known as the prophet of God's love. Like Jason said, the penalty for what she did was death. You're supposed to be stoned. But instead, as we'll read later, what does God do? It doesn't say go out and stone her. You take her back. That is what I am going to do to you as a nation down the road. But that's what I'm going to allow to happen. Even though you've turned your back on me, even though you've gone after these other gods that are trying to, that you think are giving you all this stuff, whenever really it was me. And we'll read about that in chapter 2, next class session. But even though you've turned your back on me, I still love you enough that I'm going to provide this way, this avenue for you. And that's that message of hope. Going back to that review slide, the things that the prophets, as one of the things that the prophets did was to give them hope to the people who were faithful to God, their chance of an avenue of redemption. Any other questions or comments?
It's kind of a side point, but I think as much as you see God's mercy and His lack of hesitation to take Israel back, He's prophesying about it. He constantly calls them and then tells Hosea to actually take his physical wife back. Jesus still says what He says in Matthew 19 about that the one cause where I'll permit you to put away your spouse is fornication. And I think that while we have to, as much as we can, seek after the heart of God, there's a reason why in the case of adultery, God has said you can divorce them. And this text has been exploited by some in the church to say, if your spouse commits adultery against you, then shame on you if you even think about divorcing them. That's abusive of the Word of God and of brethren. And so, we got to remember, one, who is it that's taking Israel back? God. And He is the God of immeasurable love, a depth that we can't even, imagine to plummet. And He still told us that you can divorce your spouse for the cause of fornication. And so we got to be careful with how we kind of, use these texts. It's very much a thing we should pursue to be like God, and at the same time realize He said what he said for a reason. And if I can't get to that level, being a victim of adultery, then he has permitted me to take that step. And it's not something that brings anyone joy, but it is something he's allowed based on knowledge of that experience personally for himself.
Very good point. Very good point. James.
Just one more side note about the name itself. It makes it even deeper indictment to these children of Israel, because the actual meaning of the name is the fullness of the measure of idolatry, and also the ripeness of consummate wickedness. So in other words, it was at the full ripeness of wickedness. So whether she got that name as a child going into idolatry,
Yeah.
they gave her the name, it was even worse than that. It's the representation of the children of Israel.
Very good point. Thank you. All right, so we'll end there. We'll pick up on Sunday. We'll start out with talking about Hosea's kids. Thank you.